He had billions, but no clue how to hold his own son, until a quiet maid changed everything. He wasn't expecting to cry. Not that day. Not in the hallway of his own house, holding a half-full glass of bourbon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Barefoot, still wearing the same wrinkled t-shirt from the night before. But there he was, Grayson Blackwell, a billionaire who could buy out half of Silicon Valley, staring at a moment so quiet, so human, that it cracked something inside him he didn't even know was still there. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 2 months earlier, Grayson had left San Francisco behind. Left the marble countertops, the soulless board meetings, the marriage that had collapsed in public like a building everyone had seen coming down. Headlines dragged his name across news feeds. Tech giant's divorce gets messy. And he didn't care to stay and clean up the fallout. So he packed his son into the back seat of a black SUV and disappeared into the hills outside Ashland, Oregon. A quiet place with long roads, sharp trees, and wide sky. He bought an old estate, some 1930s monstrosity with 20 rooms and a forest in the backyard, and filled it with silence. Grayson told himself he needed time to think, but what he really needed was to hide. His 8-year-old son, Caleb, had always been different, diagnosed with autism at age 4, bright but mostly nonverbal, with a deep aversion to noise and touch. Grayson never blamed him for that, but he also never knew what to do with it. He handled problems by hiring people, therapists, tutors, behavioral coaches, a whole list of experts who had folders full of notes, charts, schedules. And yet, Caleb still flinched when someone entered the room too fast, still rocked back and forth when the lights were too bright, still refused to make eye contact. Grayson wasn't cruel, just absent. Not physically, he was always in the house. But emotionally, he'd been on airplane mode for years. The house stayed cold, not in temperature, the fireplace ran on a schedule, but in the kind of way that made the walls feel like they were always listening, never speaking. Caleb spent his time in the sunroom, building towers out of small blocks. Grayson would pass by and sometimes stop to watch, but never speak. What would he even say? One Tuesday morning, the agency called. The last housekeeper had quit, said the place felt too heavy. Got someone new, the woman on the phone said. Her name's Naomi Ellison, local, background checks clean, wants to start immediately. Grayson barely listened. Fine, he said. Send her. She arrived the next day in a faded denim jacket, canvas sneakers, and a ponytail that looked like it had been redone in the truck outside. She wasn't what he expected, mid-30s maybe. Skin like warm coffee, voice soft, but not weak. Her eyes scanned the house like she'd seen places like it before, but didn't care about the price tag. She didn't say much, just smiled politely, nodded when introduced, and set her canvas tote by the laundry room door like she was planning to get to work before anyone had time to give orders. Grayson noticed one thing, though. Caleb didn't flinch when she walked past him in the hallway. That was new. Still, he brushed it off. Naomi spent the next few days cleaning with earbuds in, humming under her breath. Not pop music. Old church songs, hymns that nobody sang anymore. The ones Grayson remembered his grandmother used to hum while stirring collard greens back in Little Rock. He'd forgotten those songs. Naomi hadn't. They barely spoke. A few thank yous. A quiet good morning. Naomi never pushed, but she watched. She noticed the way Caleb stacked his blocks by color, the way he blinked fast when the refrigerator hummed too loud, the way he smiled, slightly, when she slowed her steps near him. Grayson saw it too, but he didn't know what to do with it. So he did nothing. Then came the rain. A full week of it, the kind that soaked the trees and turned the driveway into mud. On the 5th day, Grayson padded barefoot into the hallway with a glass of bourbon, looking for a charger. That's when he heard it. Not just the singing. A voice, gentle, old, from somewhere deep. It was Naomi in the sunroom. He stepped closer, quietly. He didn't want to interrupt, didn't even breathe too loud. And there, on the braided rug by the window, sat his son, curled into Naomi's side, eyes closed, breathing steady. And for the first time in his life, Caleb wasn't just calm. He looked safe. Grayson couldn't move, couldn't speak. And then, without meaning to, he let out a sound. It wasn't a sob, exactly, just something broken. Naomi looked up and met his eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't panic. She just placed her hand gently over Caleb's back and kept humming. But something shifted that day, and Grayson couldn't pretend not to notice anymore. The rain didn't stop for 3 more days. Grayson stayed mostly in his study, door closed, blinds half open, pretending to review documents he hadn't cared about in months. Every so often, he'd glance out the window and watch the trees bend in the wind, the branches dripping like they were crying for someone else. But his mind kept circling back to what he saw in the sunroom. He didn't talk about it. Not to Naomi, not to Caleb, and definitely not to himself. But it was there, hovering in the back of his head like a song you don't know the lyrics to, but can't stop humming. Naomi went about her work like nothing had happened. She swept the floors, scrubbed the baseboards, folded towels in the hallway linen closet while humming something soft under her breath. Always those same slow gospel hymns, like she was keeping time with the walls themselves. She didn't hover around Caleb, but she didn't avoid him either. She moved near him in the small ways that mattered, gently placing a folded blanket on the couch where he liked to sit, pushing his favorite blue cup forward on the table before he got there, making grilled cheese without asking what he wanted. He noticed. Grayson could tell. Caleb didn't speak, but his eyes followed her in a way they never followed anyone else. One evening, while Naomi was vacuuming the den, Caleb walked in barefoot, holding one of his block towers with both hands. Normally, the sound of the vacuum would have sent him into a spiral. He'd cover his ears, hum loudly, hide under a table. But this time, he just stood there, watching. Naomi paused and looked at him. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly, clicking the machine off. Caleb blinked, then nodded. Just once. Grayson was standing around the corner, watching from the hallway. He swallowed hard. That nod, so simple, so small, hit like a punch to the gut. He realized he'd never heard Naomi speak to his son like he was broken. She didn't talk slower, didn't raise her pitch like she was talking to a baby. She just spoke, calm, respectful, warm. Grayson found himself paying more attention after that. He started lingering in the kitchen longer when she was nearby, asking questions he normally left to the staff, like, "Did you have help growing up?" Or, "How long have you lived in Oregon?" Naomi's answers were always short, but never cold. "Born in Mississippi, moved here after my sister got sick." "Your sister okay now?" "She passed 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." She just gave a soft shrug and went back to rinsing the dishes. That was the thing about Naomi. She didn't ask for sympathy, didn't act like the world owed her anything. She just kept moving. And somehow, without meaning to, Grayson started slowing down around her. He stopped checking emails before bed. He started actually sitting at the dinner table instead of eating off his lap in the study. Caleb began sitting beside him. No words, no hand-holding, just there. And somehow, that was enough. One afternoon, Grayson found Naomi in the laundry room folding towels. A basket of Caleb's clothes sat beside her, socks unmatched, shirt still warm from the dryer. "You used to work with kids?" he asked. She looked up from the basket. "No, never did. But you seem to, I don't know, understand him." "I pay attention." He leaned against the doorframe. "Most people don't." She didn't say anything for a while, just folded another towel. Then she spoke, eyes still on the basket. "People like Caleb, they feel everything. That's the part most folks miss. They don't block stuff out the way we do. So when you raise your voice or slam a door or even sigh too loud, it's like a fire alarm in their head." Grayson didn't respond because she was right, and he knew it. Naomi continued, "He doesn't need perfection. He just needs presence, real presence." He looked down, ashamed. "I'm not good at that." Naomi looked at him finally. "Then learn." But Grayson hadn't learned anything in years that didn't involve code, contracts, or capital, and this lesson required more than money. 3 weeks in, and Naomi had already disrupted the house's rhythm, in the best way. Not with noise or mess or drama, but with quiet consistency. Her presence didn't demand attention, but it changed things, like how sunlight warms a room without asking permission. Grayson started noticing little shifts. The kitchen no longer smelled like sterile counters and untouched appliances. Now it smelled like cinnamon toast and leftover gumbo. The living room, once more like a museum exhibit than a place to rest, had pillows slightly out of place, a fleece blanket tossed casually over the arm of the couch, and Caleb's blocks in neat little rows across the rug. Naomi didn't ask for permission to do any of it. She just saw what was needed, and did it. One afternoon, Grayson caught her outside in the garden, kneeling in the dirt beside the back patio. She was pulling weeds, her sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with soil. Caleb sat nearby, crisscrossed on the grass, watching her in silence. "You don't have to do that, you know," Grayson said, stepping onto the porch. Naomi didn't look up. "I know. It's not in the job description. Neither is teaching your son how to plant basil, but here we are." Grayson blinked. "He's helping?" Naomi gave a small smile. "Watching's helping. Right now, anyway." He stepped down onto the grass, squinting in the late afternoon sun. "You always liked gardens?" She sat back on her heels. "Where I'm from, gardens weren't for fun. They were for food. We didn't call it therapy. We just called it surviving." Grayson nodded slowly. He didn't know what to say to that. After a long pause, she stood up, brushing her hands on her jeans. "But yeah, I like gardens." That was how she talked. Plain, honest, without performance. Like she didn't need you to be impressed, just present. Later that evening, while Naomi was rinsing dishes, Grayson hovered nearby. "Why'd you take this job?" he asked. Naomi didn't stop scrubbing. "Because it paid fair." "That's it?" She glanced at him. "Why? You expecting me to say I had a calling?" He chuckled. "No, I just..." She set the plate in the rack and finally turned to face him. "Look, Mr. Blackwell, I've cleaned houses for people with nothing and people with too much. Money doesn't impress me. But when I came here and I saw that boy sitting on the floor, no toys in his hands, just rocking like the world was too loud, I didn't see a paycheck. I saw a kid who needed someone to sit still with him." Grayson didn't answer. He looked away. "I'm not trying to play savior," she added. "Sometimes being the quiet person in the room is the loudest thing a child needs." He exhaled slowly. "You're right. I don't know how to reach him." Naomi softened. "Start by sitting." "Sitting?" "Yeah. Not talking, not fixing, just sitting. Let him see you without the suit, without the phone, without the plan." Grayson nodded slowly. That night, after Naomi left the room, he went to the sunroom where Caleb was lining up puzzle pieces, edge to edge, all the blues first. Grayson didn't say a word. He didn't try to help. He just sat. At first, Caleb didn't react, but after a minute, the boy shifted slightly and scooted an inch closer. Grayson didn't move, didn't dare breathe too loud. Caleb reached into the puzzle box, pulled out a green piece, and placed it gently near his father's side. It wasn't speech, but it was something. The next morning, Naomi found Grayson sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee already poured for her. "I remembered you like it black," he said. She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Look at you, paying attention." He grinned. "Trying." Naomi took the mug, nodding her thanks, and sat across from him. They didn't talk much, just sipped and watched the clouds shift outside the window. But the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was beginning to feel like the start of something. Thursday started like most days. The sky was overcast, the trees swayed gently, and Naomi was humming "Wade in the Water" under her breath while folding hand towels. Grayson had taken a morning call from his lawyer, something about another delay in the divorce proceedings, but he wasn't really listening. His eyes kept flicking toward the hallway, toward Caleb's room. He hadn't spoken to his ex-wife in over a month, and the last time they did, it had been short and sharp. Accusations dressed up as parenting decisions. She called Caleb a burden, then blamed Grayson for not fixing him. He didn't defend himself. He just ended the call and stared at the wall for a while. Naomi must have noticed the shift in his energy that morning. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, but she made a fresh pot of coffee and slid the sugar closer to him without saying a word. Around noon, the sound of music drifted from the sunroom. It wasn't loud, but it was rhythmic. Claps, stomps, an old spiritual she must have found online. "This Little Light of Mine," sung with raw voices, like it was recorded in a backwoods church with no microphones. Grayson followed the sound, and what he saw made him freeze. Naomi was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Caleb sat in front of her, mirroring her pose, eyes wide, hands on his lap. She clapped gently, then stopped, then clapped again. A rhythm. "Your turn," she whispered. Caleb blinked, hesitated, then slowly, awkwardly, clapped twice. She smiled. "Yes, like that. Again." He clapped again. Grayson's throat tightened. Naomi looked up and saw him. She gave him a quiet nod, but didn't stop. She stayed focused on Caleb. The boy clapped again, this time with a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Naomi leaned in slightly. "You like that one?" Caleb nodded. She lifted her hands slowly and began to tap her fingers on the floor, like a light drum beat. Caleb copied her, tapping his fingers beside his knees. It was so small, so simple. But in Grayson's world, it was a breakthrough. He stepped quietly into the room, crouched down near them, and waited for Caleb to notice. The boy looked up, saw his father, and hesitated. Grayson held his breath. Caleb leaned slightly toward Naomi, but he didn't shrink away. Then, without a word, he reached out and tapped the rhythm again, but this time on Grayson's knee. Grayson didn't move. He couldn't. Naomi smiled. Not big, just a small, knowing smile like she'd seen storms break before, and this one was just beginning to pass. After a few minutes, Caleb stood up and padded away to the corner where his blocks were. Grayson exhaled slowly. That was new, Naomi nodded. He trusted you with his rhythm. He sat back on the rug. I didn't think I'd ever see that. Naomi picked up a stray block from the floor. It's not magic, just patience. Yeah, but you've done more in 3 weeks than I have in 8 years. She looked at him carefully. You were doing what you knew. Now you're learning something new. He glanced toward the corner. Caleb had begun sorting his blocks into color piles again, more focused than usual. I want to be better, Grayson said. Naomi didn't respond right away. Then she said quietly, then stop trying to win him. He's not a pitch to close. Just be there when he looks for you. He nodded, eyes still locked on his son. Later that night, Grayson knocked softly on the door of the staff quarters. Naomi opened it, eyes tired but gentle. He handed her a folded envelope. Your pay, with a bonus. I didn't ask for that. I know, he said, but I want you to stay. Naomi studied him for a long moment, then opened the door a little wider. You ever fix a leaky faucet? Grayson blinked. What? The kitchen. It's dripping. I was going to get to it tomorrow, but if you're serious about helping around here... He gave a quiet laugh and followed her down the hall. But it wasn't really about the faucet. It was about learning to show up, even when you didn't know how. The next few days didn't feel like a miracle. They just felt different. Not louder, not brighter, but lighter, in a way that wasn't easy to explain. Like the house finally took a deep breath after holding it for too long. Grayson stopped sleeping in the guest bedroom and returned to his own, even if the king-sized mattress felt colder without anyone beside him. He began waking up before his alarm, fixing breakfast before Naomi even made it downstairs, which, to her credit, surprised her. You trying to take my job? She asked, one eyebrow raised, looking at the half-burnt toast. He handed her a plate. It's edible, she laughed. Barely, but she ate it anyway. Caleb, too, began moving through the house differently. Not freely, not without his quirks, but with more curiosity. He started watching Naomi's hands as she did things, wiping the table, buttoning a shirt, rinsing vegetables. One afternoon, Naomi was at the sink, scrubbing carrots for dinner. Caleb approached silently and tugged at the hem of her shirt. She turned, drying her hands. Hey, baby. He didn't speak, just held out his own hand, open, palm up, mimicking her movements from earlier. You want to wash? He nodded. She gently placed a small carrot in his hand, turned the water on low, and let him rinse it. He looked up at her once, then back at the carrot. Focused, deliberate. Grayson saw the whole thing from the doorway and said nothing, but his heart felt like it had grown a size too big for his chest. That night, he sat at the dining table long after Naomi and Caleb had gone to their rooms. He stared at his hands, palms rough, fingers stiff, from years of typing, swiping, signing papers. He couldn't remember the last time those hands had made something that mattered. The next day, he joined Naomi in the garden. You here to help or hover? She teased. I'm trying to learn. She handed him a pair of gloves. Then dig. They worked in silence for a while, pulling weeds, patting soil, planting small green shoots of something Naomi promised would be tomatoes if they didn't mess it up. Grayson wasn't good at it, but Naomi didn't correct him much. She just moved alongside him, steady as ever. After an hour, he wiped his forehead and sat back. You ever regret not doing something else? Naomi looked at the dirt on her knees. Like what? I don't know. A different life. She thought about that. There were things I wanted, but I stopped measuring my life by what didn't happen. I look at what's in front of me now. That's enough. He stared at her for a long moment. You make things feel possible. Naomi didn't flinch. You just finally stopped running. There was no flirtation in her voice, just truth. And somehow, that truth settled inside him better than any compliment ever had. That evening, Caleb had what Naomi called a hard moment. Not a meltdown, not quite, but a long, painful episode where his body couldn't regulate itself. He curled up on the bathroom floor, fists tight against his ears, tears running sideways down his face. Naomi found him first. She crouched beside him, whispering, not touching, just matching his breath. Slow, intentional, calm. Grayson arrived a minute later, panic written all over his face. What happened? Is he... Naomi held up her hand. Give him a second. He knelt down beside her. I didn't... Shh, she said gently. Just breathe with him. Grayson stared at his son, who was shaking like a leaf, unable to speak. So he matched his breath to Naomi's. In, out, in, out. Eventually, the tremble slowed. Caleb opened his eyes. Naomi smiled. There you are. Caleb didn't speak, but he rolled slightly closer until his shoulder rested gently against Grayson's arm. Grayson didn't move, didn't dare. They sat like that for a long time. When Caleb finally drifted off to sleep, Naomi stood slowly. You did good, she said. Grayson looked up, exhausted. I didn't know what to do. You stayed. That's more than most. But staying meant feeling everything. And for Grayson, that part was just beginning. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of quiet day that usually passed without much happening. Naomi was in the laundry room, humming low as she ironed Caleb's shirts. Grayson was in the study, flipping through emails, though his mind wasn't on work. Caleb was in the living room, stacking blocks again, but not just stacking, building something. Intentional, focused, blue, red, green, then yellow, repeating, a pattern. Grayson peeked in from the hall, arms crossed. He watched his son's hands move like clockwork. He wanted to say something, to praise him, but every time he opened his mouth, it felt too big, like whatever he said might break the moment. Then the phone rang. It was his ex-wife. Naomi heard it from the hallway. She paused, looked toward the office, and kept ironing. Grayson stared at the name on the screen for 3 rings before picking up. Hello? Grayson, she said, sharp. I need to talk to you about the school situation. I told you we're not sending him back there. And I told you I don't care what your new maid thinks. Her name is Naomi. A pause. You've got a maid making decisions about our child? Grayson's voice dropped. She's done more for him in a month than you've done in 3 years. You're out of your mind. You're losing it, Grayson. You don't even know that woman. He didn't answer. He just hung up. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. He sat there at his desk, heart pounding, jaw clenched. Who was he, really? A father? A failure? A man hiding behind screens and bank accounts, letting a woman he barely knew fix the parts of his life he couldn't face? He stormed out of the study, found Naomi in the kitchen, wiping down the counter. She thinks you're manipulating me, he said flatly. Naomi turned slowly. Who does? My ex. Naomi raised her eyebrows. She called you? Grayson nodded. Said I don't know you, that you're some stranger playing house. Naomi set the rag down. Well, she said quietly, I am a stranger. You never asked much about me. Grayson blinked. I didn't mean it like that. She stepped back slightly. Maybe you didn't, but she's not wrong. You don't know my story. You don't even know what I've lost. I know you care about him. Yes, I do, but If this is about your ego or guilt or feigning something you broke, don't put that on me." Her voice wasn't angry, but it was firm. She continued, "I took this job to clean, to help, to maybe bring a little peace where there wasn't any. But I won't be a band-aid for you, Grayson. I'm not here to be your emotional rehab." Grayson stood frozen. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right." Naomi looked at him, steady. "So what are you going to do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and left the room. Naomi exhaled and leaned against the counter. Her hands trembled slightly. She hadn't planned to care this much, hadn't planned to build something real in a house that wasn't hers. But Caleb wasn't just a job anymore. He was a child she'd grown to love, and that scared her. That night, Naomi packed a small bag, just in case. She didn't want to leave, but she needed to be ready. The next morning, she found Caleb sitting by the kitchen door, fully dressed, shoes on the wrong feet, holding his toy train. "Where are you headed?" she asked gently. He didn't speak. He just pointed toward the door. She crouched beside him. "You want to go outside?" He nodded once. She opened the door and let him step onto the porch. Grayson was already there, sitting on the steps, hair messy, eyes red. Naomi froze in the doorway. Caleb walked up beside his father. Didn't sit, just placed the train gently in Grayson's lap. Grayson looked down at it, then up at Naomi. "I'm sorry," he said, "for expecting you to fix things I broke." Naomi said nothing. He continued, "I want to do better, not just for Caleb, for me, for whatever this is between us." She crossed her arms. "And what is this?" "I don't know yet, but I know it's real, and I'm not going to run from it." Naomi stared at him for a long time. Then she stepped outside, sat beside him, and looked out over the trees. Caleb sat on her other side and laid his head lightly on her shoulder. They sat like that for a while. No one moved, but healing doesn't happen all at once. It starts with one choice to stay. By the time spring arrived in Ashland, the rhythm of the house had completely changed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. Grayson started doing more than just being present. He began engaging, folding laundry, sitting with Caleb during his sensory breaks, asking Naomi questions, not to be polite, but because he genuinely wanted to know her. He learned that she used to sing in a church choir before her sister got sick, that she once wanted to be a teacher, that she never had kids of her own, not because she didn't want to, but because life got in the way. Naomi learned, in turn, that Grayson's father left when he was 10, that his mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, that somewhere along the way, he decided success would keep him from ever feeling powerless again. But success doesn't change the past, and money doesn't teach you how to love. Caleb kept making progress. Small things, subtle. He still didn't talk much, but he started reaching out for connection, sitting closer, placing objects gently in Grayson's hands, brushing his fingers along Naomi's arm when she walked past, just to know she was there. One night, after dinner, Caleb brought his puzzle to the table. He didn't hand it to Naomi or to Grayson. He sat down between them, opened the box, and patted the table with his small hand. An invitation. Grayson and Naomi sat. No questions, no instructions. They just helped. They built the edges together, then slowly worked their way in. Piece by piece, the picture came together. Not fast, not perfect, but together. Later that week, Naomi got a call. A job offer at a nearby child development center. Higher pay, benefits, a chance to do meaningful work full time. She sat with it for a long time. Didn't bring it up right away. That evening, Grayson found her in the sunroom, sitting in Caleb's usual spot. "You're quiet," he said, walking in. She held up her phone. "Got offered a job, real one." His jaw clenched slightly. "Oh, I haven't said yes." He nodded slowly. "Do you want it?" Naomi looked out the window. "I want to help kids. Always have." Grayson stepped closer. "You already do." She looked up at him. "This house isn't mine, Grayson. You and Caleb. You're not mine." Grayson kneeled beside her. "Maybe not by blood, but what we've built here. This isn't just work. This is something sacred." Naomi didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, "I don't want to leave him." "You don't have to." I need to know you're not just leaning on me because you don't want to do it alone. I was at first, he admitted, but I'm not anymore. I want you beside us. Not in front, not behind, beside. Naomi's eyes welled, but she held the tears in place. I've never been invited into something like this. You're not being invited, Grayson said softly. You're being chosen. Outside, they heard the screen door creak open. Caleb walked in quietly, barefoot, holding one of his drawings. A simple crayon sketch. 3 stick figures under a blue scribbled sky. One taller figure, one in the middle, and one smaller, holding both hands. He handed it to Naomi. She stared at it for a long time, then turned to Grayson. I'll stay, but only if we all keep building this together. He smiled. Deal. From then on, things weren't perfect. There were still hard days, still silence, still the slow unlearning of old habits. But they had each other. Naomi didn't take the job. Instead, she helped Grayson set up a small learning space for Caleb in one of the back rooms. Soft lighting, sensory toys, and a garden bench just outside the window. Grayson took fewer meetings, fewer phone calls. He spent more mornings making breakfast and more evenings playing puzzles with no intention of winning. And Caleb? Caleb grew. He didn't need fixing, just understanding. He didn't need therapy to replace connection. He just needed love that stayed. And now he had it. Because sometimes the most unexpected people walk into your life not to change it, but to help you become who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt like you were failing the people you love, remember, it's never too late to show up. Stay, try, be present. And if someone offers you grace, take it. Now tell me, who's been your Naomi? Or who have you been that for? Let us know in the comments.